Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up from February 21st through 27th. This week I read a short story, I read 2 books, I watched 7 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 2 books. The short story is unpublished, but I mostly wanted to mention it in case you weren't aware that Alyssa Cole has a newsletter, because Alyssa Cole has a newsletter, and occasionally, apparently, she's just going to send us stuff she just wrote. Typos and all. The short story she sent us this time was called A Fur for Fur, and it was starring a female blacksmith in the 1800s in the United States and a werewolf. That is a ship that somebody on the internet wanted, and that is a ship that they got. Since this is unpublished, this is not one of those things I'm going to actually put on my reading spreadsheet. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this existed. The first book I finished this week was About Canada Disability Rights, the 2nd edition. This is a book that I actually asked for from the publisher. It actually came out in 2020 as the updated 2nd edition, and it is a primer on the disability rights movement in Canada and what that looks like right now. If you're more familiar with the state of disability in Canada than I am, you might not be shocked to realize that it is very disjointed as to what the regulations are. Kind of every province and territory has its own regulations, and whether or not they actually have a council for disability in that province is it's kind of up in the air. There were some things in here I knew about previously. There are definitely a lot more things that I didn't know about, and this will be a good volume to refer back to when I'm just trying to remember something from it, because it is very small, but it is also very dense, so I didn't exactly take in all of the information. The other book I read this week was The Outrage by William Hussey. This was an e-arc, and I believe it comes out at the beginning of April of this year. This is a book that takes place in the future in England when being queer has been delegalized. Therefore, obvious trigger warnings for homophobia, bullying, torture, those types of things. A fair amount of the gore is off-page, but there is some that does happen on-page. Much like William's other book that I loved, Hideous Beauty, this seemed to have 2 different timelines, the current timeline and then what had happened in the past, which gives you more context for the relationship between the protagonist and his love interest. They're in school one day when the Green Jackets come in to do a filth check, which basically just means terrorizing students and trying to figure out if they are degens, aka gay. And this is not a super great day for it, because our protagonist actually has an illegal movie in his bag, which he didn't mean to have in there, but it is, and if it's found out, it's gonna be bad times. This book is about hope and resilience and knowing your history and knowing that you have to continuously fight for your rights because there will be people that want to take them away. I thoroughly enjoyed this. The cover is gorgeous. You should pre-order it if it sounds like something you can handle. This week Netflix clearly caught on that I like cooking shows, so it told me about Nadiya Bakes, and I thought, why not give it a go? I do really enjoy her. She is very nice. I enjoy that this is something that was filmed in the current times, so obviously there's distancing and all of that type of thing. I also really enjoy that she feeds whatever her last creation of the episode is to the camera crew and the light ops and everything like that. I really like seeing that kind of behind the scenes thing of being like, you guys need to eat this, it's wonderful. I only watched a couple of episodes, but I feel like this is the type of show that I'm going to put on when I only have a short amount of time before I need to go do something else but want to kind of fill that time. And it looks like she has at least one other cooking show on Netflix, so that will probably be in my future. I also finished the last couple of episodes of Crazy Delicious, which is a cooking competition show. Basically, you're cooking for these food gods and you're given these really outrageous tasks. This show is fun because obviously people are full of passion on it. The host is really lovely. The food gods seem kind of cool. The set is really beautiful. If you've never seen it before and you like cooking shows, go for it. Our current roommates watch is The Boys. We actually ended up watching all of the first season and the first episode of the 2nd season this week. I didn't know anything about this going into it. I just heard that it had something to do with superheroes and they swear a lot, and I was sold. We get a couple of perspectives right at the very beginning. We get the perspective of this one guy who, due to a tragedy, is really mad at superheroes, and we get this girl who is just becoming one of the top superheroes. This show is full of trigger warnings. It is incredibly gory and bloody. There's lots of swearing. There's mentions of sexual assault. There's also a depiction of sexual assault right on the screen at one point. However, we're having a lot of fun watching it. This week we only watched 3 more episodes of The Dark, which means we have 2 episodes left. We got to the 4th episode and it kind of stalled for me. I'm basically at this point just waiting for it to be over. If you haven't heard me talk about it before, this is a German time travel show. Every season something new is kind of added to the mix, but it always seems like the apocalypse is imminent, and that just also made me think of The Umbrella Academy because we watched that recently. And because this has such a vast cast and different timelines, so many different timelines, because time travel show, you spend a lot of time being like, wait, wait, who is that person and what timeline are we in and what, That being said, it's enjoyable enough when I'm not yelling at the TV because I don't understand what's happening. We also watched this week's episode of WandaVision, and it was a weird one. It doesn't feel like the question that was asked was ever really answered further than what the audience already knew. So I'm interested to see how the season is going to cap off, because apparently next episode is the end of the season. I was misinformed before. Of course, I stayed current on Drag Race UK, still very much enjoying it. I really don't have a lot to say about the season as a whole. Besides, I'm very much enjoying my time with it. The person that went home, I thought that was a good call this week, honestly. Her attitude was also getting on my nerves, but of course this could also be something that is heavily edited into the narrative. So I'm not saying that I don't like this person, I'm just saying from what I was given in the show, this seemed like a good time for her to leave. Instead of there being a regular episode of the 13th season of RuPaul's Drag Race, instead we got RuPaul's Drag Race Corona Can't Keep a Good Queen Down, which is a mini documentary about the filming of the 13th season of RuPaul's Drag Race. This honestly had me in my feels for a little bit, getting a little bit of the behind the scenes of what was going on, what they had to go through, the fact that a couple of the queens already had COVID before they went to the show, but like way before, like when COVID first hit, and then one of the queens also tested positive after the season, and it's one of the queens that you really don't want to see have COVID, and yet she didn't get a lot of the symptoms, and it was a lot because it was making you think back to like the very beginning, all of the fear, all of the thinking that the world was just going to shut down for 2 weeks only, and then obviously that extended. The whole thing of people coming together and wanting to make happy things for people online, and I had a lot of feelings watching this mini documentary. It was weird and wonderful. The movie I watched this week was called Work It. This was a dance movie, that is why I watched it. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that the person that plays Bram from Love, Simon was in it, and wow, can that dude dance. Also, his whole character was very funny. He was the very stuck-up, particular, like he's going to Juilliard, so people have to call him Juilliard type of person. He was the leader of the dance team, which for some reason meant that he could make all of the decisions, and like there was no teacher oversight whatsoever for these clubs. It was very strange. But our main character is this girl that has a 4.0. She's done all of these extracurriculars, and she's trying to get into Duke because that's where her dad went, and her dad is now deceased, so she wants to go basically for his legacy, and she gets to Duke and they're like, yeah, you do all these things, but like, where's your passion? And she accidentally kind of says that she's part of the Thunderbirds because she used to do their lights until she was recently kicked off that duty by the aforementioned Juilliard. And now she decides that she has to get into the Thunderbirds because she knows that the person who's recruiting for Duke is going to be at Work It, which is the big dance competition in the area, and if she's not on the stage, she's not going to get into Duke. However, she doesn't dance, so that's a problem. It's a great setup, it's a dance movie, it's misfits coming together, it's everything I like. Onto the audiobooks I listened to this week, the first one being Of Ice and Shadows, which is the follow-up to Of Fire and Stars, which I read at the beginning of the month. This is a duology. It has to do with these two princesses. One is there to marry the other princess's brother because of a political alliance, but then they fall in love instead. This is the second half of that, so I can't really talk to you too much about what the plot is, other than these characters spent a lot of this book apart, and that's why it kind of fell down for me. It makes a lot of sense why they would have to be separated, but at the same time, a lot of what I loved about the previous book was their dynamics. So even though we got all of this other political intrigue and magic and that type of thing, it was kind of lacking in that romance aspect because we didn't get to see it so much on the page. That being said, I still enjoyed it, I just didn't quite enjoy it as much as the first book. The other book I listened to was The Devil in Silver by Victor Lavalle. I went into this without knowing what it was. I read another Victor Lavalle earlier this month called The Changeling, and automatically downloaded this from my library because I knew that I wanted to read more by him. This book is about a man named Pepper who is taken to a psychiatric facility, which doesn't make any sense to him because he was just having a discussion with this man who has been harassing his ex-wife, and he just wanted him to stop. So they were having a discussion, and then all of a sudden these three guys jump out of a truck and start yelling at him and that type of thing, and it turns out they're undercover cops, but he didn't know that, so obviously he was fighting back. The cops, instead of doing extra paperwork, have now taken him to the psych facility so that the psych facility can do the extra paperwork and hold him for 3 days. It was very interesting to find out how this book was written. It was written around a time where Victor Lavalle and his partner partner had a child, like just recently, and they would give each other a couple of hours out of the day to go away and they would take care of the baby. So this was written in like coffee shops in a frenzy type of thing because they both wanted to make their deadlines. They didn't necessarily make their deadlines, but knowing that this was written in public, which I totally miss doing, going out in public and just sitting in a cafe and reading a book or writing a book in the case of that one book I wrote one time. And just knowing a lot of the character details came from these random people that he would see at these cafes. This book would make me mutter to myself while I was listening to it because there was a lot of injustice and I just wanted to yell at the characters, so obviously I was kind of yelling to myself, sometimes in public when I'd be going for walks. There was a lot of mistreatment of the patients in this facility, which I know is a thing that goes on, and I hate it a lot. But then of course, because this is a supernatural horror, there is this also supernatural element to it. Additionally, Victor Lavalle narrates his own audiobooks, which really makes me wish that my library had more of them, but now I've gone through both books that my library has, so I might have to request that they get some more. In case you're wondering, this also means that I fulfilled all of my challenges for Demonathon and then some. However, if we're going by highest points, I definitely did not win because there was somebody else who read a lot of very long books during this readathon. Not to mention I don't even know what the other team was doing. That being said, this is a very inventive readathon, so if you haven't done it before, I suggest you do it the next time it rolls around. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on a keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I recently set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal or my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!